I am the male leads long, lost first love, the one who died too soon, 15 years after my death. The system revived me to save the child on the rooftop. He is your own flesh and blood. If you don't take care of him, he truly will have nothing left. But I've always been hot, tempered, and spoiled, accustomed to being served by others. So I strode over in my high heels, grabbed him by the collar, and snapped, "Stop this pathetic act of seeking death. You're just as spineless as your father." "Where is he? Doesn't he know I'm back? Why hasn't he come to pick me up?" The young man watched me quietly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before it settled back into an unreadable calm. He tilted his head slightly, lost in thought. I clicked my tongue impatiently and ordered him, "Call Preston Gu." After a long pause, he fumbled for his phone and dialed a number. The phone rang for half a minute before ending with a voicemail prompt. I narrowed my eyes. Preston Gu dares not answer my call? How bold of him. Evan Gu seemed used to it and was about to put his phone away. I snatched it from him and dialed 3 or 4 more times in a row. The call finally connected, but a crisp female voice answered. "Sorry, Mr. Gu is working right now. Please don't disturb." She hung up without giving me any chance to speak. I was about to throw the phone when I suddenly remembered it wasn't mine. I forced my raised hand down, grinding my teeth in frustration. "Fine, just wait and see what's coming for you." Evan Gu tugged at my sleeve. When I looked at him puzzled, his glass, like eyes calmly met mine, and he uttered 2 words. "Go back." On the way back, I double-checked with the system. Is this quiet type really my son? I told Evan Gu that the taxi ride was uncomfortable, and he responded with a non-committal, I said I didn't like the driver's breathing. Its erratic rhythm was unsettling, and he just it again. I complained that his clothes were too ugly and lower my standards. And still, all I got was another Eventually, I got so angry I started cursing, demanding where that jerk Preston Gu had disappeared to. Only then did he lift his eyes to look at me, his eyelashes trembling slightly as he whispered 2 words softly. "Business trip." I was nearly driven mad with rage. He wouldn't utter a word even if beaten with a stick, as if speaking would cost him his life. He doesn't resemble my son's personality in the slightest. At just 2 years old, he could keep Preston Gu awake all night with his noise, clearly inheriting my temperament. Nothing like this silent type before me now. Host, please try to understand him a little. This child suffers from severe psychological issues, with language barriers being just one manifestation. I press my lips together, watching Evan's thin frame and dull eyes, my heart aching with frustration. What has that scoundrel Preston Gu been doing raising my child in the 15 years I've been away? After returning home, I first want to check my own room. Good. Everything was arranged exactly as it was 15 years ago, with none of my belongings missing, except for a pair of light green women's slippers, now in the entryway shoe cabinet. I glanced at them, noting they matched my style, and thought little more of it. Only after inspecting everything did I realize Evan had disappeared somewhere. His room door was locked. Frowning, I directly used a key to open it. The room was pitch black, with no lights on and the curtains drawn tightly. Not a sliver of light in sight. As the door moved, the living room light streamed in, revealing a solitary figure sitting alone by the window. I stomped over, flipped the light switch with a snap, and sat down in front of Evan Gu, crossing my arms. Evan sat there dazedly, his eyes fixed unblinkingly in one direction, as if staring at nothing. His gaze was dull and lifeless. I stared at him and uttered 3 words. "I'm hungry." Evan seemed to finally notice my presence. Hearing me, he lowered his head, pulled out his phone, and ordered takeout. "I don't eat takeout. Does Preston Gu just let you handle all your meals like this every day?" Evan set his phone down, hung his head, and ignored me again. I irritably ran my hand through my hair, turned and walked out, unable to resist complaining to the system. With this miserable situation, I'd rather be dead. Behind me, Evan Gu looked up, his eyelashes trembling slightly. I called out the system to ask about Evan's experiences over the past 15 years. The system told me that after my death, Preston Gu became increasingly despondent, Sometimes he even neglected his work, let alone taking care of Evan. Once, Preston got drunk and slept for 2 full days. During that time, Evan had nothing to eat, crying until he passed out from hunger and had to be rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. After that incident, Preston left Evan with a nanny and threw himself into his work. Seeing Preston's lack of concern for the child, the nanny treated Evan poorly too, often skipping his meals and occasionally scolding or hitting him. It wasn't until Evan fainted from starvation that Preston rushed back and discovered the situation. By then, Evan was already seriously ill and couldn't even attend school. Preston fired the nanny and struggled to find someone to care for the child until his assistant, Celine Sue, volunteered to take on the task. Celine Sue. I recalled that time when a woman answered Preston's phone. It must have been her. Evan Gu detested her, and because of her, he had a serious conflict with her husband. 3 years ago, Preston Gu planned to marry Celine Sue to balance work and family. However, Evan disagreed and held a knife to his wrist, forcing Preston to swear he wouldn't marry Celine, or else he would take his own life. I couldn't believe it. Preston actually wanted to marry someone else. Don't worry, host. He ultimately did not marry Celine Sue, and they remain in a boss and subordinate relationship to this day. But since then, Celine has held a grudge against Evan, and her attitude toward him has cooled. I frowned. What did she do? Learning from the nanny's mistake. She didn't dare to be too obvious. She just told Evan every day, "Your mother isn't coming back. You need to be sensible and not make things hard for your dad. Preston needs a wife who can stand by his side and be his right hand, not a deceased the one that got away." I sneered coldly. Well, what a perfect right hand she is. Host, what do you plan to do next? If Preston Gu's got water in his brain, I'll just knock it out for him. I smirked with amusement. And that's Celine Sue, using such tricks against my son. She's just asking for trouble. Though I hadn't expected to confront Celine Sue so soon. The next morning, while I was still sleeping in my room, I was abruptly awakened by a series of crackling noises. I pulled the blanket over my face, intending to go back to sleep. Then I heard an argument outside the room. A woman's voice, tinged with reproach, said, "Evan, how could you bring a stranger home so casually? And an unknown woman at that? I know you've never liked me being by Mr. Gu sighed, but you can't retaliate against him this way. What position are you putting Mr. Gu in? And what do you take yourself for?" But no matter what Celine Sue said, Evan maintained the same stance. "You're not allowed to go in." Celine Sue raised her voice slightly. "Evan, you're being so disobedient. It's truly disappointing. Do you really want me to tell Mr. Gu that you brought some shady woman home and let her sleep in your mother's room?" I don't know what Evan said, but Celine's tone suddenly shifted, becoming extremely stern. "In that case, I have no choice but to let Mr. Gu personally discipline you." Playing with my nails, I chuckled at this point and opened the door. See me come out. Evan frowned slightly. "Did we wake you?" "It's fine. I was about to wake up anyway." Celine looked me over. "You are indeed beautiful. No wonder you've managed to seduce Evan to this extent. However, as long as I remain by Mr. Gu's side, I won't allow someone like you to enter the Gu family. Evan is naive by nature and doesn't interact much with the outside world. You clearly targeted this weakness to manipulate him." Slap. A crisp sound rang out. Celine covered the bright red handprint on her face, looking at me in disbelief. "How dare you hit me?" I smiled. "That slap was meant for you." Celine took a deep breath and spoke into her phone. "Mr. Gu, I assume you heard all that. What Evan has done this time is completely unacceptable. Allowing this woman to run wild in your home." "Wait a moment." Preston Gu's voice came through the phone, tinged with a barely noticeable excitement and irrepressible joy. "Turn on the video. I want to see her face." Celine Sue paused briefly, but followed Preston Gu's instruction to turn on the video, raising the camera to point at me. "Get out." A voice with a slight chill spoke up. Evan Gu stepped in front of me, covering the camera with his hand to prevent Preston Gu from seeing my face. Before anyone could react, he pulled me into the room and locked the door behind us. Celine Sue pounded on the door from outside, accusing him. "Evan, Why are you so rebellious now, going against your father for a woman? You're going to disappoint him." Evan Gu's tone was indifferent and calm. "None of your business." Celine Sue tried every tactic outside, but nothing worked. Even when she complained to Preston Gu, Evan acted as if he didn't hear. She lingered at the door for nearly an hour before finally giving up and leaving on her own. In the room, I stared at Evan Gu, thoughtful. "Why don't you want Preston Gu to see me?" Evan's behavior was truly unusual, not like a child's tantrum. This child seemed unsociable, but he was thoughtful and sensitive. There must be a reason for his actions. Evan slightly lifted his head and looked at me. He suddenly reached out, grabbed my wrist, and his voice trembled faintly. "Don't leave." My heart warmed, and I gently wrapped my arms around Evan's back, stroking the top of his head softly. My voice was gentle. "Don't be afraid. I won't go." Evan buried his head in my embrace for a few seconds before stepping back and showing me some documents on his phone. The more I read, the more my brow furrowed. What is Preston thinking? Did he really agree to this? The documents listed the 10 most outstanding students Preston had sponsored in recent years, and according to the descriptions, he intended to choose one from them to adopt as his heir. I was so angry I wanted to call and berate him immediately. Has he lost his mind? The older he gets, the more his brain shrinks. What an idiot. Evan tugged at my hand. "It was Uncle who arranged it. Don't trust him." I was taken aback for a moment. Evan's uncle was my cousin Liu Zhou, who had grown up with me since childhood. Our relationship was quite good. When I insisted on marrying Preston Gu and Grandpa disagreed, it was Leo who helped persuade him. I calmed down and looked at Evan. "What else do you know?" He shook his head. "It's fine. I'll handle these matters." I called Grandpa's secretary, briefly explained the situation, and asked him to investigate Liu Zhou and Preston Gu's current whereabouts. "Understood. I'll send someone to look into it immediately and have the results for you in 3 hours. Wait, there's one more thing. Miss, does the old gentleman know you've returned? I haven't told Grandpa yet. Let's not rush to inform him. By the way, how is Grandpa's health?" "The old gentleman is in good health, but he misses you dearly and often talks about you." I blinked, feeling a tightness in my throat. "I miss Grandpa too." The secretary informed me that Preston Gu had just flown back from abroad and went straight from the airport to a company meeting to announce his chosen successor. I told Evan Gu to stay home, changed the house passcode, then drove straight to the airport to intercept Preston Gu. So, this is how he's been taking care of Evan all these years I've been away. What an outstanding job. Following a car based on the secretary's information, I was about to overtake and stop it when I suddenly realized we were heading the wrong way. This isn't the route to the company. I slowed down and trailed from a distance, wanting to see where he was really going. Eventually, the car drove straight out to the suburbs. As I followed, I noticed the car's path becoming erratic until it screeched to a halt, scraping against the guardrail. The door swung open, and 2 men tumbled out, locked in a struggle. Preston Gu was clearly outmatched, grabbed and pinned against the car window, where he took a hard punch that doubled him over into a crouch. The driver pressed Preston to the ground, picked up a rock, and aimed it at his head, ready to strike. I pulled over, got out, and rushed over in my high heels. Wielding a wrench I dug out from the trunk and smashing it hard against the driver's head. The driver's grip on Preston Gu loosened, and he staggered toward me. Before he could fully turn, I delivered another kick, sending him sprawling to the ground. Preston was a mess, his clothes filthy, his bangs disheveled and sticking to his eyelids. Gasping for breath, he squinted at me, his attempt to stand up suddenly freezing mid-motion. He stayed in that position, staring intently at me, murmuring as if in a dream, "Claire, is that you? I haven't seen you in so long. I thought you never wanted to see me again." Confirmed, his mind was still foggy. Not wanting to waste time, I lifted my foot and kicked him squarely in the thigh. He let out a grunt, then immediately reached out and grabbed my ankle. Such a familiar strength. Preston chuckled softly, his gaze never leaving me for a second. "Claire, it really is you." I sneered coldly, wrenching my hand free from Preston Gu's grasp. then raised my foot and stomped hard on his chest, grinding my heel forcefully a few times. Come on, tell me, how exactly have you been bullying my son in the 15 years I've been gone? Preston Goose stared at me blankly, letting out a confused huh. I straddled his waist and slapped him across the face. Who told you to abandon Evan to a nanny? Who allowed you to let Celine Sue walk all over him? And who gave you permission to adopt some heir? So you think just because I'm dead, you can bully my son like this? Did you ever truly care about me? Did you ever truly care about Evan as your son? Preston Goo grabbed my hand, his eyes reddening. I'm sorry, Claire. In the years right after you left, every time I saw that child, I was reminded of you. There were so many times I wanted to join you. I had no choice but to entrust his care to others. Later, when he grew a bit older, he refused to get close to me anymore, and I was busy with company affairs myself. Slap! Another sharp, resounding slap landed. I grabbed Preston Goo by the collar, gritting my teeth as I spat out each word. What does that have to do with him? Why should a 2-year-old child bear the burden of my death? He was only 2 when I left. He was so young. What could he possibly understand? Losing his mother at such a tender age. And you neglected him completely. Preston Goo, are you even human? Do you have any conscience at all? Preston Goo endured several slaps from me without resistance, then cautiously reached for my hand. Tears welled in his eyes, his refined and handsome face marked with bright red palm prints, looking utterly victimized. Claire, I was wrong. I'll never dare do it again. What exactly are you and that Leojo up to? What happened today? Explain it clearly to me. It's a long story. Claire, please let go of me first. I slowly released his collar, saying coldly, you'd better have your own plan, or I won't let you off for today's incident. Seeing me release him, Preston Goo moved closer, nestling into my embrace and taking my hand. He adjusted his half-rimmed glasses and gave me a smile. Don't worry, Claire, I know exactly what to do. From the day I met Preston Goo, I knew he wasn't someone to be trifled with. People like him, who've climbed up from the bottom, are experts at scheming and biding their time. My first encounter with Preston Goo was at a karaoke bar where he worked part-time as a server. It was a gathering set up by friends, and someone who had a grudge against Preston made him pour drinks for me. My temper is notorious in our circle for being unyielding, and that person clearly intended to set him up. But I've always had a knack for defying expectations. So not only did I drink what Preston poured and ate the fruit he offered, but I also pulled him to sit beside me, thoroughly enjoying the stunned expressions on their faces all night. After the party ended, instead of leaving right away, I went to the restroom and stumbled upon someone cornering Preston. Preston hung his head, hair covering his eyes, looking utterly pathetic as he endured the punches and kicks without resistance. I walked past them, acting as if I hadn't seen anything. Such useless trash. Even standing near me was an insult to my presence. As I passed by the two of them, I suddenly heard a tinkling sound. I glanced toward the noise and immediately stopped in my tracks. That was my earring. I instinctively reached up to touch my ear. Sure enough, the right one was bare. Damn, what is this thing? How did it end up on me? The guy who was beating up Preston Goo frowned and kicked my earring away with his foot. My face immediately darkened as I called the general manager over. The outcome was predictable. The guy with the restless foot got fired and had to compensate me. Before leaving, I glanced at Preston Goo, who had remained silent the whole time. Seeing me look at him, the manager thought I had some interest in this guy and was about to change his tune accordingly. But then he heard me say, I don't like him. Fire him too. Also, this man was very disrespectful to me in the private room earlier. Either we settle this in court, or you pay me 100,000 to keep it quiet. Your choice. The manager was momentarily stunned, but quickly nodded in agreement. I looked at Preston Goo, whose expression had darkened, and curled the corner of my lips. If you use me as your weapon, be prepared to get stabbed in return. And I'm only asking for money. I've already shown more than enough mercy. I heard Preston Goo's name again on the school's award announcement board. That's when I learned that Preston Goo was actually my senior in the same major. I laughed at that moment. Isn't the top prize for this competition $30,000? How come he hasn't paid me back a single cent? My friend was first surprised that Preston Gu actually owed me money, then told me he had a seriously ill mother at home. He probably used that prize money for her medical expenses. Oh, I retorted. What's that got to do with me? I had someone relay a message to Preston Gu. He must repay half of the compensation amount, $50,000, within 1 month. And if he doesn't, hearing my friend convey the question, I chuckled softly. Then he'd better pack up and prepare to drop out of here. Unexpectedly, Preston Gu transferred the full 100,000 yuan to my card on the 5th day. Since he kept his promise, I naturally had no reason to make things difficult for him. I had thought that from then on, I would never cross paths with Preston Gu again. One afternoon, while conducting research in the lab, I dozed off at the desk from exhaustion. When I woke up, the lab was pitch black, and my phone had run out of battery. I fumbled to turn on the light, but it wouldn't come on no matter how many times I pressed the switch. Then I went to pull the door, only to find it locked from the outside. A calm voice came from behind me. Stop pulling. You can't get out. Squinting, I made out the silhouette in the darkness. Preston Gu, did you do this? Do you think that's possible? Why would I lock myself in the lab with you? I kicked the wall in frustration. Who the hell did you piss off this time? How should I know? Preston Gu crouched against the wall, seemingly accustomed to such situations. His reaction, much calmer than mine. Too many people have it in for me. Recalling his past actions, I sneered mockingly. With your sneaky, scheming nature, it's no wonder people find you annoying. Preston Gu chuckled softly, but didn't answer me. I took a gentle breath and stared blankly into the darkness before me. Actually, I have a slight case of claustrophobia. So when I first woke up alone in the dark, my instinct was to grab my phone and turn on the light. But having someone nearby made me feel slightly better. Where did you get that $100,000? I couldn't help but move closer to him as I asked this question. I didn't steal it, didn't rob anyone, and didn't break any laws. I turned my head and stared at Preston Gu. He sighed, helplessly. I sold my latest experimental data. I was somewhat surprised that he would sell something like that so casually. Not long after, my roommate, noticing I hadn't returned, came to the lab looking for me and rescued both Preston Gu and me. Before leaving, I called out to Preston Gu. Hey, how's your mother doing? Can you still afford her medical expenses? Preston Gu lowered his head and adjusted his glasses. Thank you for your concern. Everything is fine for now. I just don't want certain people's meddling to delay my mother's treatment. Also, who is the one targeting you? Give me their name. Preston Gu shook his head with a smile, but his eyes behind the lenses were icy cold. I'll handle it myself. Since he said so, I didn't press further. Half a month later, I heard that one of Preston Gu's roommates was exposed for having an inappropriate relationship with their advisor. And the advisor's spouse came to the school to publicly lament how deeply they had been deceived over the years. In the end, the male student was expelled, and the advisor was fired by the school. Wow, that's explosive. Who would have thought Advisor Chu, who always seemed so refined on the surface, was secretly involved with his own student, and a male one at that? There were already rumors in the department about him being too close with some male students, but I didn't believe them at first. Oh my God. His wife must be devastated. My first thought upon hearing this was that it was probably Preston Gu's doing again. I couldn't help but call him. You really go all out with your moves, don't you? He brought this upon himself. What does it have to do with me? Whatever you say, I casually replied, steering the conversation to what I wanted to ask. Aren't you working under that old creep too? Have you ever been harassed? Preston Gu paused for a moment before asking in return. Why are you so concerned about me? Don't flatter yourself. From then on, my relationship with Preston Gu gradually spiraled into uncontrollable territory. He had no power, no connections, no one to rely on, so he acted with extreme caution, planning every step carefully, whereas I had been spoiled and willful since childhood, fiercely protective and unafraid of trouble. For the next 2 years, I was the one looking out for Preston Gu. The year we graduated from university, his mother finally succumbed to her illness, and passed away. Preston Gu was like a lost soul, kneeling by the hospital bed for a long time, blankly holding his mother's hand, tears streaming down his face. He said, "Claire, from now on, I only have you." I held him and told him it would be okay, that I would stay by his side. A month later, I defied my grandpa and the family's objections, resolutely marrying Preston Gu. Not long after, I became pregnant. Preston was overjoyed, guarding me like a treasure every day. And after poring over ancient texts, he named our son Evan Gu. He said, "You are my moon, and he is my star. Having you both by my side makes me so happy." Those were truly beautiful years. But when Evan was 2, I died in a car accident. I reported it to the police. And after they took the driver away, I immediately took Preston to the company. He told me that Liu Zhou had been openly and covertly competing with him for company shares all these years. After I left, Grandpa never treated him well again, barely cared about Evan, and largely ignored these matters. Leo wanted him to adopt a child to dilute his authority. With Evan about to turn 18, he feared Grandpa would give the shares to Evan. Among those children, many were my own people. I had planned to turn the situation to my advantage. But now that you're back, Claire, everything has changed. So all these years, you've been fighting against Liu Zhou? I pondered thoughtfully. Yes. Preston Gu exhaled softly. Your grandfather didn't trust me. I had little say in the company, and Celine Su was still Leo's person. I could only slowly wear him down. Who knew it would take 15 years? He looked at me, his eyes reddening again. Actually, I've always suspected there was something wrong with that car accident years ago, but the mastermind hid their tracks too well. I still don't have solid evidence, but all signs point to one person, Liu Zhou. I see. I let out a derisive laugh. My cousin is truly cunning. Now everything makes sense. Grandpa always favored me over him since we were young. To compete for the successor position, he first laid low for years to gain my trust, then convinced Grandpa to agree to my marriage with Preston Gu, and finally orchestrated my death to gradually take over the shares from Preston and Evan Gu. I called my secretary, asking him to investigate the driver from earlier, and forwarded all the evidence Preston had gathered over the years for verification and further investigation along this lead. Soon after, my secretary sent over the materials I needed. Just as Preston Gu had said, everything was orchestrated by Liu Zhou behind the scenes. I opened the car door and gave Preston Gu a slight nod of my chin. Let's go. I'll take you back to confront them. In the conference room, Liu Zhou was addressing the executives, with Grandpa's face displayed on the large screen up front. After thorough discussion between Mr. Zhou and myself, we've decided to adopt Alex Su as Preston's stepson, and he will subsequently participate in company affairs. Suddenly, the main door swung open. Preston Gu entered and immediately refuted. I never said anything about adopting a stepson. The moment he appeared, Liu Zhou frowned almost imperceptibly, then forced a smile onto his face. Preston, didn't we just agree on the candidate yesterday? Why the sudden change of heart? Someone chimed in. Evan Gu hasn't been living up to expectations. It's not a bad idea to groom a capable successor now. Preston Gu turned to the large screen. Does Elder Chen share this view as well? On the screen, Grandpa listened to these words in silence. My heart sank slightly. Preston Gu said Grandpa didn't trust him and didn't care about Evan Gu either. I originally thought it was just an exaggeration, but now it seems it's actually true. Evan Gu is far from being a disappointing child. I walked into the conference room, my gaze sweeping over the company veterans before finally settling on Grandpa. I declared, Vort bevort. He is my son, Claire Chen's child, and he will only be more outstanding than me. Liu Zhou was the first to break the silence. His expression was particularly strange, yet he forced a gentle demeanor. Preston, where did you find this girl? She looks quite like Claire. Yes, almost identical. I almost thought she really was Claire's child. Preston, have you been feeling unwell lately? I think it's best if you take a break from company affairs. I told you, I am Claire Chen. My eyes met Grandpa's. They don't dare to acknowledge me, but Grandpa, Do you not dare to recognize me either? From the moment I stepped into this conference room, Grandpa's gaze never left me. The white-haired old man stared with piercing eyes, his eyelids trembling slightly. He let out a soft sigh and affirmed, "It's my Claire. This can't be. Didn't Claire Chin pass away 15 years ago?" "Sir, you must be mistaken. That's absolutely impossible." "Why would it be impossible?" I smiled faintly. "I never actually died 15 years ago. I just fell into a deep slumber. A research institute preserved my body using cryopreservation technology. I gradually regained consciousness a year ago and fully recovered my mobility half a month ago." "But why would you do this? Why keep us in the dark all this time?" "It was all Grandpa's plan, to maintain absolute secrecy. Even Preston Gu and Evan Gu weren't aware I was still alive. Grandpa and I have always been in perfect sync, even without prior discussion or a single exchanged glance. He naturally understood my intentions." Grandpa nodded. "Indeed, it was my plan." The executives' expressions instantly turned inscrutable as they each began calculating their next moves. Only Liu Zhou couldn't manage a smile. His usually gentle, upturned lips now pressed into a firm line. Naturally, I wasn't about to let him off so easily. "I heard that while I was away, cousin was urging Preston Gu to marry another woman. Someone named. What was it? Celine Su." I recall this Celine Su was cousin's high school classmate. "Claire," Liu Zhou interrupted me. "Nobody knew you were actually still alive back then. Preston was depressed because of you for quite some time. I noticed Celine was quite helpful by his side. She could both share his workload and take care of Evan, so I mentioned it a few times. Now that you're back, of course we won't bring this up again, but you haven't been involved with company affairs for over a decade, and the business environment has changed. I'm afraid you might not be as competent as before." Cousin makes a good point. I naturally took over the conversation. "Then let's transfer my position to Preston Gu. Preston has his own work to handle too. He might not be able to manage the additional workload. Isn't there still Evan? Bring that boy into the company for training. Have Grandpa's secretary mentor him personally, just like when they taught me before. Grandpa, what do you think? Let's do as Claire says." The meeting was about to conclude, but I smiled and stepped forward. "Everyone, please hold on. I have one more thing to announce. My cousin, Liu Zhou, the company's current vice president, attempted to murder me 15 years ago. This morning, he tried the same method to kill Preston Gu." "What? Hold on. You need solid evidence to make such claims." Liu Zhou looked at me with a hint of helplessness. "That's right, Claire. You can't just accuse me without proof. What reason would I have to do this? My cousin's acting skills are truly unparalleled. Even I'm a bit envious." I shook my head. "Unfortunately, no matter how well you act, it's useless in the face of hard evidence." Liu Zhou maintained his polite demeanor. "What are you talking about, cousin? I don't quite understand." "Then, let me put it simply. The police are already downstairs at the company. If you have anything to argue, you can say it to them yourself." The next moment, 2 police officers stormed into the meeting room and took Liu Zhou away. Before leaving, Liu Zhou glanced at me once more, his expression unusually grim. I curved my eyes into a bright smile. "Oh, right, I forgot to tell you. You'll have Celine Su for company inside, so you won't be too lonely. Really sorry about that, cousin. Your years of planning. I came back and threw it all into chaos. Grandpa wants us to go to the Chin family estate. Preston Gu and I had planned to pick up Evan Gu from home first before heading over. But before we set off, the secretary informed me that Grandpa had already sent someone to take Evan away. When we arrived at the Chin family estate, we saw Grandpa sitting in the garden pavilion with Evan by his side. A few books lay on the table, and Grandpa was turning a page as he spoke to him. From a distance, it was an exceptionally harmonious scene. It suddenly reminded me of when I was very young. Grandpa would have me sit on his lap and teach me in the same way. I breathed a sigh of relief. I knew it. Grandpa does care about Evan after all. Preston Gu gave a slight smile but said nothing. Upon seeing us approach, Grandpa had the butler take Evan away first. Evan Gu refused to leave, silently walking over to me and tugging at my clothes. His glass, like eyes stubbornly fixed on me. I couldn't help but chuckle. It's all right, Grandpa and I have something to discuss. Could you go over there first? Evan hesitated for a long moment before finally letting go. Evan tugged at my sleeve. When I looked at him puzzled, his glass, like eyes calmly met mine, and he uttered 2 words. Before I could say anything, Grandpa instructed Preston to go along as well. After everyone had left, the elderly man before me fixed me with a stern gaze and said in an uncompromising tone, "All right, now tell me honestly, what kind of show are you putting on here?" I clear my throat softly. I wouldn't try to fool you. Why so harsh? After briefly explaining the situation to Grandpa, his aged, bony hand rested on my shoulder and gave it a gentle pat. "You silly girl, it's good to have you back." But the next moment, he abruptly changed the subject. "So that means you're only 27 this year, right?" I paused. "I suppose so. Why do you ask? That Preston is already over 40. Have you considered finding a new partner?" I fell silent. Grandpa was still trying to persuade me. "Look, he's at that age where his health surely isn't what it used to be. While you're still young, find a nice young man to marry and have a child." The more he spoke, the more absurd it got. I quickly interrupted. "Evan is all I need. I don't want to have any more children. Besides, I've been absent from their lives for too long. I want to spend quality time with him and Preston from now on." Grandpa sighed. "All right then, I'll keep an eye out for a few candidates. And if you change your mind later, we can revisit this." I suddenly remembered something. "Grandpa, Evan's psychological state isn't very stable. I need to focus on accompanying him through treatment for a while. As for company matters, I'll have to trouble you to keep an eye on them until his condition improves." He waved his hand dismissively. I know. You're always giving me extra work to do. Dinner should be about ready. Let's go and not keep them waiting too long." As we stepped out of the pavilion, I saw Evan waiting for us at the door. Spotting us from afar, his eyes instantly lit up like twinkling stars. I took his hand and smiled. "Let's go. Time for dinner."